In November 2017, a single comment on Reddit became the most disliked comment in the platform's entire history. Not close, not by a small margin. The runner-up had fewer than 90,000 downvotes. This comment had over 680,000. It was posted by a video game company, defending why players had to grind for roughly 40 hours or pay real money to unlock Luke Skywalker in a Star Wars game. The company lost $3 billion in stock value within weeks. Governments on 3 continents opened investigations. And the words pride and accomplishment became a punchline that still hasn't fully gone away. This is the lootbox crisis, and is the closest the modern games industry has come to a genuine public reckoning with its own monetization. Lootboxes weren't new in 2017. By the time Star Wars Battlefront 2 launched, they had already been part of gaming for years. A lootbox is a virtual container that gives the player a randomized selection of items when opened, sometimes earned through gameplay, sometimes purchased with real money, often both. The mechanic spread gradually across the 2010s. Cosmetic crates in shooters, card packs in sport games, gacha style pulls in mobile titles, EA's FIFA Ultimate Team mode, built around exactly this kind of randomized card pack, was generating roughly $800 million a year in revenue by 2017, according to EA's own reporting. China had already identified the core problem years before Western regulators caught up. In 2017, the Chinese government became the first jurisdiction in the world to require publishers to publicly disclose the odds of obtaining each item inside a loot box, establishing, ahead of any Western country, that randomized purchases needed some form of transparency. In the West, the mechanic had mostly avoided serious scrutiny. Games like Overwatch sold loot boxes containing only cosmetic items. Skins, voice lines, nothing that affected how the game played. Players grumbled about the drop rates, but cosmetic-only loot boxes rarely generated sustained outrage, because nobody's in-game performance depended on opening one. The distinction that mattered, and the one Star Wars Battlefront 2 was about to violate, was between cosmetic loot boxes and what critics would start calling pay-to-win loot boxes. Containers that could grant actual competitive advantages, not just appearance changes. Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot boxes contained star cards, upgrades that increased weapon damage, health regeneration, and unlocked new abilities for specific classes and heroes. These weren't cosmetic. A player who purchased loot boxes could become statistically stronger in multiplayer than a player who didn't. For most players before 2017, loot boxes were an annoyance, not a crisis. A minor tax on convenience in games that were otherwise fully playable without spending another cent. Then EA opened the Battlefront 2 beta to the public in October 2017, and the entire framing of the conversation changed within days. EA's beta for Star Wars Battlefront 2 ran from October 6 to October 11, 2017. It was meant to build excitement ahead of launch. Instead, it became the controversy's opening chapter. Players in the beta discovered that loot boxes were one of the primary ways to acquire star cards, and that star cards came in 4 tiers of quality, common through Epic, each tier granting larger stat boosts than the last. The progression system appeared deliberately structured to push players towards spending real money to keep pace competitively. EA responded on October 12th with a blog post promising that Epic tier star cards would be removed from loot boxes. On October 31st, EA made further changes, removing Epic loot from crates entirely. Neither adjustment quieted the criticism. By this point, the conversation had moved past the specific tier system and into the core question of whether paying real money for randomized competitive advantages was acceptable at all. The breaking point arrived on November 9, 2017. when Battlefront 2 became playable early for subscribers to EA Access. Players quickly calculated what it actually cost, in time or money, to unlock the game's most iconic characters. Unlocking Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader required 60,000 in-game credits, an amount Reddit users estimated would take approximately 40 hours of grinding to earn through normal gameplay, or could be bypassed by purchasing crystals, a separate premium currency with real money. On November 12, 2017, a Reddit thread titled "Seriously, I paid $80 to have Vader locked" gained traction. An official EA community team account responded, explaining that the high unlock cost was intended to provide players with a sense of pride and accomplishment for unlocking different heroes. The comment detonated almost immediately. Within days it had accumulated more downvotes than any comment in Reddit's history, eventually reaching 683,000 downvotes. Officially certified in the Guinness World Records 2020 edition as the most downvoted comment ever recorded on the platform. The second most downvoted comment in Reddit's history, by comparison, sits at just 88,906. The phrase pride and accomplishment became an instant, lasting piece of internet vocabulary. Shorthand still used years later for any company defending an obviously unpopular monetization decision with corporate language that ignores what players are actually upset about. What made the comment so combustible wasn't really its content. Plenty of corporate statements use fake, defecting language. It was the timing and the target. A beloved Star Wars character, locked behind a number specifically calculated from beta data to extract maximum playtime or spending. Defended using language that sounded like it was congratulating players for being exploited. The backlash had already cost EA credibility. It was about to cost the company something it actually measured in dollars. On November 16, 2017, the day before the wide release, EA announced it was temporarily removing all microtransactions and lootbox purchases from Battlefront 2 entirely. Removing microtransactions the day before launch was framed publicly as EA listening to its players. The reality was closer to damage control under outside pressure. Reports at the time indicated that Jimmy Pitaro, the chairman of Disney's Consumer Products and Interactive Media Division, had personally contacted EA CEO Andrew Wilson hours before the announcement, suggesting Disney itself had intervened to protect the Star Wars brand from being permanently associated with a gambling controversy. EA initially told the US Securities and Exchange Commission that removing microtransactions was not expected to have a material impact on its fiscal year 2018 guidance. The market disagreed. Over the course of November 2017, EA's stock price fell approximately 8.5%, wiping out roughly $3 billion in shareholder value, even as competitors Take-Two and Activision saw their stock rise or hold steady over the same period. The damage extended past the stock price. In EA's subsequent quarterly earnings call, CFO Blake Jorgensen confirmed that Battlefront 2 had missed the company's internal sales target of 10 million units by roughly 10%, and directly attributed the shortfall to the lootbox controversy. Governments started paying attention almost immediately. Hawaii State Representatives Chris Lee and Shane Quinlan publicly compared lootbox mechanics to casino-style psychological exploitation in November 2017 and announced plans to introduce legislation targeting the sale of Battlefront 2 specifically. In April 2018, the Belgian Gaming Commission completed an investigation into 4 games: FIFA 18, Overwatch, Counter-Strike Global Offensive and Battlefront 2, and ruled that paid loot boxes constituted illegal gambling under Belgium law, threatening publishers with criminal fines up to $800,000 for non-compliance. The Netherlands launched a parallel investigation the same year, fining EA over its FIFA Ultimate Team packs specifically. though that fine was later overturned on appeal when a higher Dutch court ruled the mechanic was sufficiently integrated into normal gameplay to not constitute standalone gambling. By 2019, the controversy had outlived the game itself. In September 2019, the Guinness World Records 2020 edition officially certified EA's Pride and Accomplishment comment as the most downvoted comment in Reddit's history, codifying in a literal published record book that this single moment had become bigger than the game that caused it. For EA, the financial damage was real but survivable. A publisher with billions in annual revenue, absorbing a multi-billion-dollar stock dip and a missed sales target is a bad quarter, not an extinction event. The reputational damage proved far longer lasting. Years later, pride and accomplishment remained one of the most recognizable phrases in gaming culture, a permanent shorthand for corporate tone deafness around monetization. The crisis forced a question the industry had been avoiding for years. Who exactly was supposed to regulate this? The answers that emerged were inconsistent, slow, and in some cases barely enforced at all. Nearly a decade later, the lootbox crisis never produced one clear global resolution. It produced a patchwork, different in nearly every country and still being argued over as of 2026. In the United States, the industry chose self-regulation over waiting for lawmakers to act. The Entertainment Software Rating Board introduced a general in-game purchases notice in 2018, then expanded it in April 2020 with a more specific label. In-game purchases includes random items, required on any ESRB-rated game where the player doesn't know which specific item they'll receive before paying. Europe's equivalent rating body, PEGI, introduced an identical, includes paid random items label on the same day. Apple and Google separately began requiring all mobile games containing loot boxes to disclose the odds of receiving each item. A bipartisan bill called the Protecting Children from Abusive Game Mechanics Act was introduced in the US Senate in 2019, aiming to ban loot boxes and pay-to-win sales to minors. It was never enacted. As of 2026, the United States bill has no federal law specifically regulating loot boxes. The ESRB label and platform-level odds disclosures remain the closest thing to a national standard, and both are voluntarily industry measures rather than legal requirements. Belgium took the opposite approach, treating loot boxes as a hard legal line rather than a labeling problem. Following its 2018 ruling, the country effectively forced major publishers to either remove paid loot boxes from their games for Belgian players or risk prosecution. Nintendo, rather than comply, simply stopped distributing certain products in Belgium altogether. Yet a 2022 academic study found that 82% of the highest grossing iPhone games available in Belgium still contained paid randomized monetization, suggesting the ban's real-world enforcement had been far weaker than its legal threat implied. The regulatory gap persisted because loot boxes sit in a genuine legal grey zone almost everywhere. Traditional gambling law typically requires three elements: payment, chance, and a prize with real-world value that can be cashed out. Most loot boxes satisfy the first two clearly, but get murky on the third. Virtual items usually can't be directly redeemed for cash through the publisher, even when unofficial secondary markets let players sell them anyway. That single legal distinction is the reason France treats loot boxes as fundamentally different from gambling, while Belgium, looking at the same mechanic, ruled the opposite way. By the mid-2020s, the industry's monetization had also partly shifted shape rather than disappearing. Battle passes structured around a known fixed list of rewards, unlocked through guaranteed progression rather than chance, became the dominant model in major live service games, specifically because they deliver similar revenue without triggering the same gambling comparison. Valve's Counter-Strike 2 introduced a Genesis uplink terminal in September 2025 that let players review an item's exact identity and price before purchasing, rather than paying blind, a direct, deliberate retreat from classic lootbox randomness. explicitly designed to stay defensible under the regulatory pressure other models still face. Nearly a decade after Battlefront 2, the lootbox crisis hasn't really ended. It's been managed, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, into something closer to a permanent low-grade legal dispute than a settled question, with real enforced bans in small numbers of countries, voluntary labels everywhere else, and entirely new monetization models built specifically to dodge the controversy rather than resolve it. The European Union may be the next major test. In late 2025, the European Parliament's Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee adopted a report urging the European Commission to ban loot boxes outright in any game accessible to minors, as part of a broader Digital Fairness Act expected to be formally proposed sometime in 2026. Whether that becomes binding law or simply another report added to the pile depends entirely on what happens after this video is published, which is itself proof that the crisis EA triggered in 2017 was never actually resolved, it was only ever passed. In November 2017, a single Reddit comment about Darth Vader became the most disliked comment ever posted on the platform. That fact alone sounds almost trivial. It wasn't. Behind that comment was a genuine industry-wide reckoning. A monetization model that had quietly spread across an entire decade of gaming, suddenly forced into public view by one beta test, one unlock cost, and one badly worded piece of corporate language. EA lost $3 billion in stock value. Belgium and the Netherlands moved to ban the mechanic outright. The ESRB and PEGI built entirely new labeling systems. The US Senate tried and failed to pass a law. And nearly a decade later, loot boxes still exist. Reshaped, relabeled, and in some places restricted, but never fully resolved by any single law, ruling, or company decision. The gaming industry didn't destroy itself in 2017, but it came close enough that the words pride and accomplishment still means something different to every player who lived through it. That's the lootbox crisis.